I grew up as a child of a mother born in 1954. She was part of the post-war generation, a time when people believed that being a hard physical worker was the only virtue in life. Nobody is important, everyone can be replaced, work hard, and don't complain. And while she was in her teenage years during the feminist movements, the hippie times, freedom, love, liberation, she always held onto the traditionalist mindset that education is a waste of time and money, especially for women, as their only goal is to marry a well-earning man and become a mother. And she herself lived by these values, and while she had a formal education and even learned a job, as soon as she was married, she left the job and became a housewife. When I was growing up, asking too many questions was heavily discouraged, and even when I was worried about things in school being too hard to understand, she would quote the Roman philosopher Seneca the Younger, telling me, "We learn not for school but for life." And ironically, she used a scholar's words to emphasize her anti-education beliefs. And she didn't even criticize the quality of education directly, like the quote did, but she criticized the very fact that education was needed at all, because she believed I should focus on practical skills to become a mother and a wife instead. My mother had a hard time with me as I am autistic, although I wasn't diagnosed until later in life. And as a child, my special interests and hyper-focused were almost exclusively on academic topics. I would constantly ask questions, and my curiosity was infinite, to the point of frustration when nobody could provide the answers I could not live without. And the library was my refuge, a place where I could completely sink into the world of knowledge, books about everything, and friendly staff that helped me finding the right books. And I jumped from reference book to almanacs to encyclopedias to educational guides. And then at home, I would immediately share all of the things that I had learned that day. And in my mother's eyes, this was a significant flaw. She believed my distractions by these unimportant things would keep me from finding my intended place in life. And she often voiced concerns that being too intelligent, though she called it like being a klugscheißer, which translates to being a know-it-all, would scare away potential husbands. And while she was deeply ingrained in the traditionalist Catholic Christian mindset, my grandfather, her father, who was born in 1898 and who grew up during a time of scientific curiosity, faced a similar problem with his parents as I did. My grandfather believed that learning and knowledge were incredibly valuable. And ever since he was young, he was curious about nature and the world around him. Even though his parents couldn't answer his questions or keep up with his curiosity, he kept searching for answers on his own. He thought that finding things out for yourself was way more rewarding than having someone else explain everything to you. And he learned a lot through his own efforts and experiences, which he found both beautiful and enlightening. My grandfather also believed that true understanding comes both from practical learning and thinking deeply about things. And he always stressed the importance of learning throughout life and recognized that some things in life have both natural and supernatural aspects, but both should not be confused. He was critical of people who wanted recognition and status without actually knowing much. And he valued humility and modesty, thinking that real wisdom meant using what you know to help others. Even though he wasn't an academic, he became friends with Max Planck, who by this time already had won a Nobel Prize in physics. And their friendship may have seemed unusual to the outside, but this interaction he described perfectly framed its very foundation. During a conversation my grandfather had with him, he had trouble following up with what they were talking about, so he interrupted Planck. And he said, "Professor, I cannot follow your explanations because I'm not an academic. I'm just a barber." And Max Planck just smiled at him and said, "I didn't seek an academic in you, but I found something else that brings me joy. You gave me valuable suggestions and you did not only visit me to question me." My grandfather admired Planck for his humility and generosity, which had a big impact on him and his view on the academic world. And overall, my grandfather's views on learning were all about asking questions and staying curious throughout life. When I look back on my life and my approach to learning and understanding the world, I see many similarities with my grandfather. From his writings, I see how much he experimented and explored, just as I do. Even though our lives began almost 100 years apart, his words about his passions and compassion feel like a warm hug from the other side. My grandfather was religious, but his faith and philosophy were influenced by Christian existentialism. He believed in the importance of each individual person and their power over their own life, with the ultimate goal being redemption and eternal life. The uniqueness and significance of every human being were so central to his beliefs. And I believe his experience in both world wars shaped him deeply. He valued intellectual freedom, personal integrity, and the courage to challenge unjust authority. And despite the distance of time, we share these values. His resilience was reflected in this quote. "Much was demanded of me in life, nothing was given to me. In the forests, steppes, and swamps of Russia, in the Carpathian Mountains, in the west through France and other states, from east to west, from north to south, through all German districts, my path led me. War and war again, captivity, hunger, thirst, heat, cold, and all I wanted was to live. And I lived." Looking back on my life, his life, and growing up in an anti-education home that discouraged me from learning, which I rebelled against, I'm grateful to have my grandfather's words written on paper. And I'm glad I inherited his resilience and drive to challenge authorities. It helped me to find my true place and not the one a traditionalist mindset had assigned for me. I believe that traditionalist anti-education movements are dangerous because they prevent us from learning from the past and understanding how things are connected. They aim to keep us ignorant, to control us, without us being able to ask the right questions. My grandfather hoped to find eternal life after death, and while I am not religious, I will carry his thoughts within me and share them with the world. The spark of rebellion he had planted in me cannot be taken back anymore, but should be shared. And maybe that's his eternal life in the end.